is Amanda Marti, and I don't get to read for Amanda because I've known Amanda for several years. Amanda's actually worked in the field for a couple of decades, and about half of that time she ran the Autism program of Illinois' Center for Metro East, which was in the Maryville area. It was part of UCP Heartland at that time. A couple of years ago, that transition, UCP Heartland decided that was not their niche, and Hope took over that center and made some changes, and Amanda has gone back to school. She's going to be finishing her master's degree in counseling this year, and she's doing her internship now. Then she gets to take a couple of national exams. But I will tell you, having been with the autism program myself, and being someone who's clinically trained, having someone who works in mental health who also is comfortable working with people on the spectrum is pretty unique. Because most mental health professionals say, oh, you have autism, go there. I don't treat you. So Amanda's going to be great at that. She's done a lot of stuff on her own and with the autism program and with UCP. And what she's going to talk about today is community engagement, community assessment, because that's one of the big things that she's done. So, welcome, Amanda.
So, yeah, as Russ said, I've been around for quite a while working with individuals with autism, and actually starting out with just developmental disabilities in general. And about 4 years ago, Russ got me involved in this Targeting Autism Forum, and I'm really happy to be a part of this. I've always been a fan of libraries. Somebody said earlier about the smell of old books, and I kind of got goosebumps. So for me to kind of combine those two things, and we've got a dog here this time too. I mean, this is great for me. So what I'm going to talk about today. So after the first year we had the Targeting Autism Forum, we were charged with going back into our communities and doing a needs assessment. And I had been part of one of those before, so I kind of took the reins on that and involved some other people in our community. And Maggie, if you'll stand up, Maggie was a big part of this. Maggie's our local librarian, and she played a big role. So if you have any questions and you're not able to get to me with them, Maggie can probably answer some, and since she is a librarian, she can give you really the nuts and bolts of what she has going on, because she's taken this assessment that we did and really run with it, and is doing some great things in her library. So did we get the clicker fixed, or you might click?
It might be off. Is there a little orange? If you can't find it.
No. Got it, okay. So what I'd like to take you through today is that step-by-step how we did it, how we made this work. So we'll talk about forming the steering committee itself, preparing for the meeting, the structure, what the meeting looked like, how we evaluated those results, and then developing our plan of action. So think about who you may already have a connection with in your community. Who do you know that may know other people on the autism spectrum, or maybe serving people with special needs? And who can you connect with and invite onto this steering committee? I was very fortunate to have a committee that we were just passionate about autism and serving people with special needs, and we all came together and just divided up the work, and it came together beautifully. So start out with meeting with just maybe one or two people. Do some brainstorming. Think about who you both may know, or who is in the community that may want to be a part of this. And then from that, create a list and come up with maybe 5 to 7 people that you feel like you can work with that would be a good part of this steering committee that you're forming, someone that you will work well with and that has lots of other connections. And then I've listed some possible stakeholders up here: library staff, teachers, parents, adults with autism, service providers, service coordinators, someone who may not provide the direct service, but who helps people find those services. Your early intervention specialists, therapists, physicians. Just think about, go through your contact list and who do you know that might have a connection or might know someone else who who could join this and be really passionate about it. And then once you get this group of people together, identify what your service area, what your territory might be. You don't want it to be too broad. I know the original committee that I was on was looking at a service area of 2 counties, and then when we did this one that I'm speaking on today, we focused more in a Madison County area, more centrally located. We pared it down just to serve a smaller area, and then you can always move on from that. But you probably want to serve your own library district or school district. Put together a roster so that everybody has each other's contact information. A lot of times now it's difficult to come up with those regular meeting dates and all be able to get together. So you might be doing a lot of work via email or phone conferencing. But be able to reach out to each other when you need to, or when you're in the middle of a part of your project that you might be stuck on. It is best if you do your steering committee meetings that you have a regularly set date and time so that everybody can block that portion of their calendar out and just know every Tuesday at 2 o'clock or once a month, the first Tuesday of the month at 2, this is what I have going on and I'm not going to schedule anything else if I can avoid it. Determine your task, what those might be, and a timeline. And I have an example of a timeline that I will show also. And then have everybody commit to a certain task. Think about the things that needs to be done. Everybody on your committee would have a different interest or ability or connection to complete a certain task. And just divide it up and make that work a lot easier. And eventually, when you start planning your meeting itself, you will want to have small group facilitators, so determine who that will be. I had a small committee and a small group of people, so each member on the committee just became a facilitator, and we discussed and agreed how that would happen. So I don't know if you can see this or not. This is just my example of what our committee roster looked like, just names, contact information, agency or company that they were with. So in preparing for your community meeting, you want to select a venue. And of course, Maggie offered up her some rooms at the library. We were able to break out into different sections, have some small groups, and then come together in a larger community room. Hopefully each of your steering committee members will have their own contact list of names or other people that would be interested in being a part of this, and everybody can, once you get all of the details worked out, your venue, your date, your time, you can reach out to those stakeholders and invite them to this meeting. And then as a committee, determine what your format might be. We had some ideas. I think we had some direction that we were going in, the type of information that we needed to collect, what we needed our findings to be, or what information we needed to find out about. So that gave us that direction or format of our meeting. And then discuss other things that you might need. Do you want refreshments? Are you going to offer childcare? We did have volunteers. One of the persons on the steering committee was a professor. She had grad students who were willing to come in and offer childcare. I don't think we had anyone show up for the childcare other than those students' own children, but we did at least have that offering. and had the volunteers for that, so that's something to look into. Ask your people who register to attend your event if they need any special accommodations so that you can have that prepared in advance. And then for your small group facilitators, go through some kind of facilitation training or just prepare everyone how to run a group, how to keep it on task, those types of things. And then hold your meeting. So this is a list of questions that we asked on our registration form, just to get their information, their name, their contact info. And then there were other things that we were trying to gather to put together some statistics or information from the people who did attend or registered to attend our meeting. So we also wanted to find out some additional information, like how did they hear about it? Whose list did they come off of? Did the information get shared? Did it go through Facebook? Did it get passed around to school? How did that information get out there? So in the future, you know the best route to take when you're trying to contact those same stakeholders or family members again. One of the things that we tried to gather information on was what services were available. So who was already receiving services and how were those services supporting them? Employment was another, education and employment were other areas that we were looking into. So we asked about that on our registration form. And then, of course, since we were offering childcare, we wanted to get a count on how many children would be attending, so we had enough volunteers. So we asked about that, and if they needed any special accommodations or things that we should be aware of. And also their special interests. So if we needed Pokemon cards available for them, or a particular movie, or Legos, or whatever they might have a really strong interest in, we can have that available for them. So some information on preparing your small group facilitators. Determine how you're going to assign the small groups. Are they just going to be randomly assigned? Are you going to, from your registration form, determine who has children of what age and maybe lump all the preschool children in one small group and all the parents of teenagers in another group? Or are you going to just assign them by, we knew a lot of the people who were coming to our session, and we were able to divide them up by, we know this person's very outspoken, we know this person, would match well with this other person, so we can put them in a group together, or this person's going to be able to provide a lot of information to this other person who's more needing the information more because they're newer to the autism world. So figure out what kinds of small groups you want to put together. And then decide what your format's going to be. How are you going to break that out? What questions are you going to be asking? How long of a span of time are you giving to each of those questions? How is the information going to be compiled? We set time limits on those questions. So from this time to this time, we are going to discuss A. And we had timers, Ross or Mary, could you hold up that visual timer that you have there? This is called a time timer if you haven't seen these before. This is one of my favorite items. The red will disappear as there's a red dial on there, so rather than ticking like a regular timer would be annoying, the red will disappear. So it gives a visual representation of time that's not too distracting, but you can easily see how much time you have left. So I think we had a timer like that in each of our groups. And then I would also walk around, I was kind of an overall facilitator, would walk around to each of those groups and see how they were all doing and make sure that they were following, staying on task with that time so that we could wrap it up on time because we had a deadline to be out of there. So that was just an easy way to keep track of where we were at and what was coming next. Focus on the positive. So a lot of times when people get together, it becomes kind of a bitch session. We didn't get this, or we went to this agency and this awful thing happened. So one of the things we worked with as everybody was becoming a facilitator was how to keep people back on task, how to redirect them back to the positive and what's available rather than what, you know, all the horror stories, because we know they happen, they're out there. Stress the identification of gaps in services, but then a lot of times people start to try to come up with solutions. Well, we need this to happen, and why don't we do this, and just get it back to where are the gaps. We'll do our solution planning later. So the facilitators need to be good at redirecting everyone to just focus on where the gaps are and not to try to solve it all in one night. There are no bad ideas. Allow your participants to dream big. And you can always do a step-by-step process with that later, but if they want the moon and stars, put the moon and stars on your list and see where you go with it. Keep it to one person at a time speaking. So again, your facilitators need to be good at redirecting people or, and even drawing people out. There might be a more outspoken person in your small group and another person who is quiet, but you know they have ideas, and find a way to draw them out and get their ideas to you. Then we prepared our supplies for the meeting, some sign-in and registration sheets. Those post-it wall pads, that's how we kept a running list of all of the ideas that people shouted out. We just have it all written down, and then that with the sticky paper, this like a big sticky note, we moved those to the large room at the end and it posted them up so everybody could see what all of the other groups had come up with. Some color coding dots, we use those to help prioritize. So while we dream big at first and put everything on the list that could be thought of, then we pared that down by sticking some colored dots on what was most important. Some chart markers to write with, name tags so everybody can remember each other's names, refreshments if you want those. Some handouts. We did also have some additional, we had a list of resources that we were already aware of in the community. Everybody came from different areas, so we had handouts from everyone's organization and just some information so the parents didn't feel like they came to a meeting and they shared all of their ideas and got nothing out of it. So they were able to walk out with some new resources too. Just an example of a sign-in sheet. And then again, what our community meeting looked like. So we had a 15-minute introduction that consisted of just your housekeeping, where the bathrooms were, the small groups meeting, introducing ourselves as the steering committee, talked about why we were there, what our goal was, what was going to be happening when they did divide out into small groups, and then talking about all the small groups reconvening into a large group and what would be happening then. And then what we were going to do with the information that they helped us to gather. So then they broke out into their small groups. We were able to go into some small rooms or some seating areas within the library. I've done this before, that everyone was kind of at round tables. However, whatever space you have, just make it work. The first thing we did was resource mapping. So this was everyone making a list of what resources they already knew were available. So again, parents who weren't aware of one resource got the opportunity to find out about them from the others who were attending. And then it was written on that large post-it paper. And then the next segment was identifying unmet needs. What services are you needing that you haven't been able to find? What is not out there? Where are our gaps? And then we talked about how libraries could be a conduit to those services. How can you go to your library to help you find what you're looking for, the service that you're needing? What resource information can the library have available to you? And then finally, we talked about how libraries can be welcoming and accommodating to people with autism. What does someone with autism need to make this a place that's useful for them, that's pleasant, that's welcoming? At this point, then we reconvened back into the main room, and all of those Post-it pads were stuck up on the walls. Everybody got the opportunity to see ideas that the other groups came up with. Maybe somebody had a resource in one group that wasn't listed in another. And then we gave out colored dots. We gave 3 or 4 to everyone and said, stick these dots next to the services that you want to see, or what do you want to see happen? What is most important to you? And then the services with the most dots would get the most attention when we did our planning. So after this meeting dissolved and everyone went home, we scheduled another meeting for a couple of weeks later to do the evaluation. So we tallied those results just by looking at the colored dots and determining what people prioritized, what was most important in our community. And so we were able to determine the high, medium, and low priorities just by the number of colored dots that were ending up next to each topic. And through that, we could determine what resources were needed to meet those unmet needs. So we came up with a plan. We put this all together in a document, and we sent it out to our participants and asked for their feedback. Did we miss anything? Is there any other information you would like to offer? And then when that feedback came back, we developed some work groups for the highest priority items. And with those high priority items, we had different task groups to work on those. We identified what would be needed, who would be best to serve on those committees, and again, we could reach out and invite other people to join with us to help accomplish some of these tasks. And those smaller committees, those breakout committees, would meet at a regular time to work on those projects. And there's the Kellogg Foundation has a good process to, if you're not quite sure how to put this together, they have some worksheets on their site that will help you. I have that, and I believe this PowerPoint will be available. Is it being emailed to everyone, or is it on the website?
Yes, they're all going to be here.
Okay, so you will get an email with this PowerPoint on it. So if you don't have time today, or if you can't quite read the web address or any other information I have up here, it will be coming. So again, this slide I'm sure is hard to read, but this was our prioritization list from highest priorities to lowest priorities. And then we would come up with a plan to work on those. And then following that, and of course, with the state of Illinois, there was always a struggle with once you get to the planning phase to be able to keep the momentum going, because then it was a matter of time and money and who was still available and hadn't moved on to other jobs. So that seems to be where the greatest struggle is just to keep that momentum going. But there's a steering committee. If you keep in touch with all of the work groups, review their progress, hopefully they're taking notes or reporting on progress in some way. You can see where they're at with those tasks. And then once you start making progress, regularly hold those committee meetings and invite those same people to come back and join you and to bring their friends so they get feedback. They see that their efforts were worthwhile, that something actually did come out of them spending a night away from home. And hopefully they'll bring their friends along to join in, and you continually get more feedback and find out if other resources have popped up in your community, or if some have gone away and now we have new needs, we have more gaps that need to be served. So from that data that we collected at the meeting, we came up with some graphs and information, and I just put one in as an example of this was the breakout of the families who had registered to attend our meeting. You can see the majority were receiving services. It didn't mean that all of their services were being met, but a little more than 3/4 of our attendees were receiving some kind of service. And this is the timeline that I talked about in the beginning. So we just listed every possible task that needed to be completed before that meeting happened or to follow up from that meeting, and then all of the time that we had available to do it, and put a little X in the box for our deadline to help keep us on task so it didn't, keep going to the back burner as things tend to do if you don't have deadlines. So I'm wrapping up with my session really earlier. I had no idea how long this would take, but I included a couple of quotes on here that I thought would apply. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a child with autism to raise the consciousness of a village. I think about that, and as I'm becoming a counselor now after working so many years with individuals with autism, it has kind of slowed me down and made me think about things differently, and not just my own perspective, but I try to see things from many other perspectives now, and I think that will help me in the career path that I'm headed down at this point. And then the other one, whether you color it blue, whether you color the world or light it up blue, you are making a difference, so keep being you. So I thought that was important to say to all of you, and it kind of was a thank you for being part of this and being involved in this mission. And there is my contact information.
So what we'll do, since we're running early, is actually Marinica and Amanda will both take questions now. You've got some time.
We're the dream team.